So when you were talking earlier about, we were kind of talking about tiger teams and dealing with stakeholders that maybe are quite will reject that approach from procurement, where procurement are trying to say, let us help you. And they're just trying to kind of put up a bit of a wall and say, just leave me alone. I want to do it how I've always done it. Um, in terms of the adversaries that can sometimes butt heads with this, when it comes to services, what are the different kind of key adversaries that you've seen in these types of situations? And what do you think is the key to bringing them together for to make sourcing successful?
Well, I can think of a couple of examples. I had an example at Amgen with somebody that came into new to their HR team, and they basically told us, "Go away. We don't need your help. We are subject matter experts. We know exactly what we need. We know how to go get suppliers. We know how to negotiate pricing." So I had a conversation to support my category manager that had reported to me at the time. Said, let's go see if we can just set up time with them and break the ice. And we'll use some different tools. We'll use a different approach rather than we're sourcing, we're here to help. We're going to use a different approach. And we used a couple of tools that basically put a mirror in front of them to say, okay, let's talk about your current situation. What don't you like about what's happening? And that was surprising because although they said that they were experts, they had a boatload of stuff that they didn't like about their current situation. Like, okay, so we got through that. That was probably a good hour conversation that helped cleanse and show the light on what they didn't want. And then to the next stage of it was to identify their target state. What did they want the program to look like? And then after we kind of had a kumbaya moment and said, yeah, we hate this, we want this. How do we get there? So that's where we started to develop a phased plan that was mutual. We would help them with things that we had control over, and they wanted to do other things but they put it into a project plan and were able to execute on it. Um, that one stuck in my head because after an hour and a half conversation, we walked hand in hand. And we were able to execute on what their needs were. And man, that really felt good. I've had a couple of examples of that where you can go in and kind of show that mirror to them on what they don't like, what they want, and how do they want to get there. And I think that's been my most effective tool throughout my career is it's a situation target proposal. It's a simple problem solving tool. And I love that tool more than any because it does highlight so many things that are opportunities for a business function. It also shows a light at the end of the tunnel on how they can achieve what they want.
Yeah, I love that because it's basically it becomes a true problem solving exercise. You're
Yeah.
focusing on what's the pain here, and it's very interesting the way you described it as their initial approach was, I don't have any pain, everything's perfect, and that's something that I've seen many times within organisations, and within services procurement we use our tool, the Wheel of Pain, which just talks about the kind of key problems that people come up against in services procurement. And that is the thing that really gets through to people where they look at it and go, actually, yes, misclassification is a real risk for us, or yes, scoping is an absolute nightmare, or we can't track changes, or we don't have standardization in contracts. Whatever it is, it's actually the pain that is the most important thing to focus on. So I think, I totally agree with you in terms of that is how to provide the best service to a stakeholder in whatever situation it might be, because not only are you understanding their pain, but you're helping them understand it as well. So I think that's a critical part of it. And you talked about relationships earlier in procurement. That's one of the things where the human in the loop side of it is always going to be extremely critical and just getting more important. And I think, you mentioned about building those stakeholder relationships. But I think I then also look at it and go, well, do you know what? That supply chain, that those suppliers, those relationships are becoming more and more and more important the more that organizations rely on these external suppliers. And the more data you have, the more closely you work with those suppliers, the more you can make assessments of who your best suppliers are. And the more opportunity that gives stakeholders and procurement within an organization to say, we need to really stay close to these guys because they are helping drive our new product development or our bottom line growth or whatever it might be. So I think that relationship side of it, as always with procurement, can never be underestimated and never be overestimated.
Yeah. One of the things that I did for myself early on in my career was to go through intensive coaching training. I thought maybe one day I'd want to be a career coach. When I went through the training, I found that there were so many elements that applied to a business that I pull from those tools regularly to be able to work with the stakeholders using coaching techniques. And I think for anybody that has gone through any kind of coaching training, not just career coaching, but coaching training, to be able to ask the questions, to get to the heart of the situation, to understand what someone wants to become, what a function wants to become, what they want to achieve, and then a plan for how to achieve it. It's well worth the time and effort to be able to change a mindset from activity driven to coach. It's a different place to come from in those stakeholder relationships.
And when you look at the kind of way that you're managing relationships in these situations, particularly if we take sourcing, that's that's kind of a coaching mentality really across the board, isn't it? In terms of you're trying to smooth everything out and get everyone to gel together and see the bigger picture, which I think for a lot of people in organizations, that's one of the big problems is they're not necessarily either thinking about the bigger picture or they're not being kind of steered towards it. I don't know whether that's something that you've come across at all.
Absolutely. I think that in many companies, I think there's a disconnect between what the business does and how the support functions can support that. And I also think that supply chain is used as broadly to define, a subset of a lot of activity, all which affect the business. But I think I appreciate that there's a lot more emphasis on the overall supply chain. I also appreciate that there's emphasis in some of the organizations like Procurement that give the emphasis to procurement and our role in that supply chain. So kind of coming back to my early days, that I got to see the supply chain, but I also got to see how procurement plugs into that supply chain to make it function well.